presentation. There they are. I'll lay them right here so you can take those home with you. MLK, FDR, and JFK. Julius Caesar, Cleopatra, and Cicero. All great speakers throughout history. To paraphrase Cicero, he said this in 55 BC, "The purpose of a speech is to change an audience's mood, mind, or willingness to act." Winston Churchill said, "A speech is like a symphony. It has many movements, but must have only one dominant theme." There are several key elements to a speech. An introduction, which most of us do a very poor job on, including me. I did not give an introduction today. The title, which for most of us is the last thing we do. We throw it on the speech and say, okay, there it is. The points we make, which must correlate with the overall theme of the meeting, and what we call stories, but most of us give news reports or documentaries. And with that I mean, we don't bring our stories alive by having characters, dialogue, emotional change, conflict, or resolution. And then there's the gift. I call it the gift because it's the takeaway value. When we're done with our speech, what is it that we want our audience to do, think, or feel when we're done? A lot of us don't think of that. We say, I'm going to talk about this, but have no idea what the audience is thinking, number one. So we should be asking the question, what is it that my audience is thinking? And number two, 2 weeks from now, will they even remember your speech? Any of it. So then you have to ask yourself, why did I give that speech in the first place? There are two techniques common to help us do that. One is called the screen technique, where it's simile, contrast, rhyme, echo, alliteration, and metaphor. Well, that's not what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about what I call the gift or the Farm 10 technique. You might be thinking, Bob, why are you going to talk about farming? Well, that's not exactly what I'm trying to get across to you. Farm 10 is the foundational phrase, the premise, or the purpose of your speech, and what it is that you want your audience to walk away with. And what I have created is an acronym. F stands for foundational phrase. Why is it that you're giving the speech in the first place? And what is it that you want your audience to take away from that speech, and what will they remember? A lot of speeches through time. For example, if I was to say something like, click it, and what's the last half of that?
And forget.
Ticket.
Ticket.
Yeah, that's a foundational phrase. It's something we never forget, right? All right, another one. If it doesn't fit, you must. Right. Another foundational phrase. Why? It's stuck in your head. You know it. It's something. How many years ago was O.J. Simpson's trial? Here's one that's quite prevalent on TV nowadays. Nationwide is
On your side.
right. See, advertising knows an awful lot about the foundational phrase, or John might call it something else, but it's basically the same thing. Last week we had a speech by our president where she talked about real friends. Afterwards, I talked with her about that particular speech. The title that she'd given that speech really, in my mind, didn't fit the speech. It was about real friends and friendship. Now, if she wanted that speech to really stick in your mind, maybe she could have come up with something like this. Real friends are with you to the end. And repeated that 2 or 3 times through her speech to kind of make the point prevalent in your mind. You would have probably, 2 weeks from now, at least some of you would have remembered what that is. For a 5 to 7 minute speech, it's difficult. So foundational phrase is the F of our farm word. A stands for acronym. That's another way that we can get our audience to remember our message. Farm 10 is my acronym for this particular presentation of the gift. The next one is R. That is also part of what the SCREAM method, and you can use that in 2 situations. One for the body of your speech, when you're trying to take one of your points and drive your point home to support your foundational phrase. And that stands for rhyme, rhythmical, or rhetorical, by sound. Rhythmical. Nationwide is
On your side.
musical, right? That's why one of the reasons you remember it. One of the reasons why you remember it. A rhyme. Real friends are there to the end. You rhyme by sound. What you're trying to do is make it simple as you can for your audience to remember what the point is. If they can remember one of the points, they'll probably remember your overall message. The same element applies when you're doing a story. For a 5 to 7 minute speech, you honestly can do maybe 1, maybe 2 stories. But if you had a foundational phrase for each of those stories that folded in to the overall message of your speech itself, that would support that foundational phrase. Metaphor. That's another part of the SCREAM process. But it's also part of our farm process. So we got foundational phrase, acronym, rhythm, rhyme, or rhetorical question. M is metaphor. Metaphor is comparing one thing to another. Here's one for you. Convincing people to change their storytelling techniques is like trying to eat with a fork. I'm comparing how people tell their stories and how difficult it is to get them to understand that what most of us are doing when we're giving stories is actually delivering a report. Why? Because we have no emotional buy-in to that story. We're on the outside and we're looking in. You're giving us, if you ever watched the documentary and you say, oh, that's really cool, and you walk away, versus watching something on television that has something really emotional that gets to you, almost makes you cry or gets you excited. That's when we're really doing storytelling, when we're getting our audience emotionally connected with us inside the story, so they're actually living the story with us. We're reliving the story, not retelling. If we're just retelling the story, it's like watching television. How many of you get emotionally tied into television very often? No. And that's the same thing that I'm telling you about storytelling. You told your story. If you had a story that was really emotionally connecting, your audience might not remember everything you said. You said, I remember the story you told about, and your story last week was about going to the theater, right? And that was emotionally connecting with a lot of people. That was part of her message that she could have taken and molded to make it memorable with a foundational phrase that you could walk away with and therefore remember that message longer.
Come on, Lena. There's one over there beside you, and there's one over there too.
I'll take your
beside
fine.
you. Right there with Rob.
And 10. 10 stands for 10 words or less. And one of the reasons why I'm saying 10 words is that it is a challenge for any of us to sit down and really hone down our message to a point where it's clearly understood, not only by the listener, but by you, the presenter. A lot of us will get up and give speeches that are somewhat all over the place. A few weeks back, we had the black belt evaluation class. And one element that I noticed about all the speeches is that only one of those 4 speeches that we gave, that were given, really had a defined point. If the individual who was going to write that speech had sat down and written that out and said, okay, what is the message I'm going to try to get across, and you were able to get that foundational phrase down to 10 words or less, even 15. There's a lot of good foundational phrases I've counted, are 11, 12, 13. Okay, so you're a little bit over, so what? But it is really critical that we understand the reason for our message. How many of you have ever heard a speech on goal setting before? Everybody. So how do you make that message unique? Our responsibility as speakers, according to Chip and Dan Heath in their book Made to Stick, and I agree with it, is we have to make the common uncommon in order for your audience to walk away with the gift. A lot of speeches are too general, and they give us no walk-away gift. So Farm 10 is a gift that makes your message